help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
Welcome, Haley Batten, to What's the Rush podcast. I am so excited to talk to you. I feel like we have a lot of similarities in our worlds, and we don't know each other. This is the first time we're talking, but I'm so excited because I've been watching you for a while, and there's a few things that really have pulled me towards you and made me want to talk to you. And so we're going to get into a few of those. One is your concussions and, in your mountain bike racing. But two, I just see you race with such joy, and the way you put yourself out in the world just seems really happy. And so that has drawn me to you as a competitor because I know the kind of intensity and aggressive nature that you need to have on the race course. But from where I sit and what I see a real camaraderie with your teammates and even with your competitors. I see a real joy in your riding. And so I'm just super excited to talk to you because, yeah, I feel like we know each other in some ways.
Well, Rebecca, when you reached out, thanks so much for having me on. I'm really honored. I've followed your whole, career and read your book and just been so inspired by all that you've accomplished and the way you live your life as well. So I'm really excited for this conversation and I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Read my book. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. It was
When you write
really,
yours, I'll read it, okay?
oh gosh. Uh,
Well, I mean, you started so young in
mm.
mountain bike racing. I was looking up some of your stats, and like you turned pro at 17. Is that right?
Yeah, I got on my first pro team, the Cliff Pro team, when I was 16 or 17. Yeah. Yeah, pretty looking back, I'm just so grateful for that opportunity because I think it was really just the way things lined up and connections and who I knew and them needing, wanting that to help develop the next generation. And it ended up being just such an incredible opportunity and the best teammates ever. Catherine Pendrell, Leah Davison, Georgia Goulds, all these amazing Katarina Nash, like legends of our sport. And one of the best, like all women's mountain bike team, which I think also taught me how to be teammates with women, which I think sometimes in an individual sport is, I don't know if it's hard for people to do or it's such a competitive environment, but I just learned how to be teammates with women, work with women, be inspired by women. And I thought, yeah, that's definitely taken me a long way for sure.
I mean, that team, same, a bunch of my heroes on that Luna team. And
Yeah.
I remember I was starting mountain bike racing about the same time. I was 38, starting
Wow.
professional mountain bike racing. You're 17 on the Luna team. And Georgia Gould is from my hometown. I don't know if you know
Oh
that.
my gosh.
Yeah, so she's a friend, and I was like
I
watching her
didn't know that.
career. And then when she got signed to that team, I was just like, oh my gosh, you're such a hero. So, and Leah Davison, of
Yeah.
course, is a friend, and Catherine Pendrell, like a
Yep.
hero. So it's kind of cool that, decades apart, we were kind of beginning our mountain bike racing career kind
Oh,
of at the
that's
same time.
fascinating. Yeah. But that's the cool thing about our sport, right? Like my coach too, she started later on and it's just you can do that in cycling and you can have an amazing career and I think that's so cool. Yeah.
You're coaching, who's your coach?
Kristen Armstrong, she's
That's
from
right.
Boise. Yeah.
So she's in Idaho as well.
Yes.
She's come
Yeah.
to my race a couple times, so
Awesome.
there's a lot of cool connections there. I
Yeah.
love that you talked about being on a women's team from the start of your
Mhm.
professional career, and because
Yeah.
as I said at the beginning, it's something I've really noticed with you is that, and a lot of the women in the pro peloton in mountain biking seem to be friends with each
Yeah.
other, and I don't get that vibe in the men's mountain bike racing. You
Yeah.
know? And I'm just watching from the outside, but even, even in the Olympics, when you flatted, the
Mhm.
people you're competing against who instead of being like, "Oh, great, Haley flatted, I'm gonna like, take the next spot and get into medal contention." I mean, they might have been thinking that, but they also let the feed zone people know that
Yeah.
you were coming and you were flatting, and so they were ready for you. Your mechanic was ready for you. I just thought that was really, really sweet.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think in a lot of ways, when you're on the start line, the people that you have the most in common with are your competitors. They really understand what the hard work has been, the sacrifice, everything that it takes to get there. And we're pretty similar in a lot of ways. And I think sometimes when you're racing, there's very little that differentiates you besides those results, first, second, third, 10th, the result that day. But I think deep down, we all know we're all really similar and we all have the same passion and love and goals. And I think to be able to share that with each other in our sport and that's kind of the atmosphere that our sport still has is really special. And I'm proud of that for sure. And going back to the Olympics to have your competitors, not, help in a way, in one of the biggest events where a lot of people don't act like themselves at the Olympics. It's this high pressure childhood dream. And sometimes people act very strangely, because there's a lot on the line. It's super intense. There's a lot of pressure and crazy energy. I think when people can respond in that kind of way and be like, hey, Haley has a flat, and my mechanic's ready, that's pretty cool. And yeah, big shout out to Jenny Ridsveds and my teammate Laura Steger for that. That was really cool.
But how do you sit on the start line? Yes, you have all this in common. You like these people, you respect them, but you still want to rip their legs off. You want to be.
Yeah.
So, how are you balancing that sort of like, aggressive, go for it competitor mentality with like, oh, I respect and care for these people? How is that balance?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. I think for me, that's been a mindset that I've developed. It's taken time to develop over the years because I think I realized pretty early on that a comparison style of perspective, I guess, where you're comparing yourself or they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this in their training. I'm not, should I do that? That's a very negative spiral. And then at the end of the day, everybody else is out of your control. It's an non-control. Like the last thing you can do is control other people. And the only thing you can really do is control yourself and manage how you prepare, how you train, how you fuel, how you visualize, how you, prepare for your ultimate goal. And so once I think, figured that out, all my focus really became just myself and how I could prepare to be my best. And my bigger goals outside of just racing and finding that, seeking human potential, trying to be the best version of my mind, my body all together, race at this elite level. It's really, okay, well, if I'm my best, we're like sprinting towards the finish line. All of women's sport is also rising and we're raising like, okay, am I doing the jump? Okay, now we're all doing the jump, and we're riding these technical rock gardens or racing faster and faster every year. And now we have this whole next generation of young women, and now they're all hitting the jumps. They're all riding the rock gardens. They're all riding faster and stronger and going up the climbs, faster and stronger. And I think maybe that's just what women that are passionate about women's sport, like we want that. We want our sport to continue to rise. We want women's sport to continue to rise, and we want young women to have those opportunities that we have to reap the rewards of what sport provides. And so I think for me, that's really what it is. Yeah, I want to win this race because I want to be the best in the world. But at the same time, I know that if I give my best, and a really incredible mountain bike racer is going to win that race, and I know how hard I work. So if you can win, that's amazing, And so I think for me at least, my whole pursuit is very focused on me being my best, seeking my own potential. And in doing that, helping all of women's sport rise with my competitors. And it's really a team pursuit in that way, if we can all kind of see it that way,
Haley, that is such a mature attitude about competition. It's so refreshing. And I really do think that generationally, sports and competition are shifting towards this more positive, like if you're your best and everyone's competing at their best, the level rises and people are proud of their performance. And you saw it in the Olympics with women's gymnastics and the competitors celebrating others who beat them.
Yeah.
And which it's so refreshing. It took me a long time to get to that place. Remember my fourth Leadville, I've won Leadville mountain bike race 4 times.
Yeah.
And the first 3 times I was on the start line, super nervous, super
Yeah.
stressed out, looking at my competitors, kind of eyeing them up and down and like, oh, they look really fit, and kind of
Yeah.
having sort of like
Yeah.
stressful kind of, start line. And then the 4th year, my husband has always crewed for me at that race. And the
So
4th year, I wasn't nervous. I was excited, and I knew I
good.
prepared really well, and I knew the course, and I just had the confidence to go to actually look around, and actually that year looked around and I said good luck to my female competitors next to me, which, I hadn't really
Good
done
luck.
before.
Stay
Yeah, it
on
was like,
my wheel.
more, it was like, I said, have a great ride.
Yeah, totally.
And I really meant it.
Yeah.
I didn't mean, oh, good luck, try to catch me. It was, have a great ride. And
Yeah.
I honestly, it was a total shift in my attitude. And I felt the confidence in myself gave me the confidence to be like, you know what? I'm stoked there's more women on
Yeah.
the start line, because there weren't very many at that time. And I
Yeah.
remember my husband, he was after the race, after I'd won, um, he said to me, I was really worried about you at the start line because you weren't your typical, like, kind of jacked up, nervous self. He's like, you were really calm. And I'm like, I know, wasn't that weird? But it took me a lot longer to learn what you're already articulating in your racing about if you're your best, then you don't really need to compete with anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a fine balance. Like you said, you're kind of looking, okay, they look fit, or, for us, okay, they're riding that line, they're riding that feature. There's so many, or they look super strong. And part of that's good, right? Because you see, okay, they're doing that. I can, and you want that level of, you kind of need that competitive nature to be able to get better and better and see, okay, well, it said, oh, they're doing that, whatever, I don't care, or else we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be
Right.
like driven to be the best. So I think part of it's good. And I still want young athletes to have that fire and like that
Yeah.
determination to like win and be the best. And like, I think that's still good, but it has this balance where it can also tear you apart. And you have to, I think, like anything we do, and we'll talk about all sorts of things. There's always this fine line of like too much, yeah, it's hard.
Have you had races or periods where you felt like maybe you were overly competitive or critical of yourself, or comparison with other people? Have you had that
Mm.
experience?
I don't think like definitely I think when I was pretty young, I figured out the comparison thing didn't really,
Hmm.
bring me much. So I've kind of been just focusing on myself since then. But I think, there's always times where I think I definitely have high standards of what I want to accomplish and how, to continue to achieve big things. And it's, you definitely look at all these, legends of our sport or the people that are competing and achieving great stuff and being like, okay, like I got work to do, and so that I think in a way, like even this Olympic year, okay, I won World Cups, I became an Olympic medalist, but I still wanted, like part of me wanted to be with the World Cup overall winner, the world champion. I still like wanted that, even though I knew, like me and my coach had set these realistic goals of what I could accomplish that year and how much I could focus on. And then, you just want more and you want to perform. And for me, I love just that peak experience of racing, when your body is peak fitness and you're just racing at your best. And so sometimes I just want another race where I can race at that level, and everything's clicking together because I just love that feeling. But I think that's what makes that feeling so special too, is you only maybe get it like once a year, or a
Yeah.
couple times, or maybe every few years. And so yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard because I think I have high standards for myself, and I'm always working towards that and trying to be better and better and better. And um, I think even in times of lows, like injuries, concussions, which we'll talk about, and um, other life challenges, it's hard to accept that maybe that's not where you are right now, and being able to pause and slow down and realize, when your favorite thing to do is just get better and better and better and see that progression consistently, when
Yeah.
you have to really shut it down and your life really isn't in that place and you have to fully accept that it's not, that's really hard. And I think like for me, I've learned a lot about those moments, but I'm still learning a lot. about those moments too.
I mean, I know what you're saying, that addictive feeling of when you're at peak fitness, you feel like you've prepared everything, you're at an awesome, huge race. Like it is addicting.
Oh
But
yeah.
only one person can win,
Mhm.
and everyone on that start line wants to win. But it's a very cool feeling to chase, but it's so elusive. And so
Yeah.
I want to go a little bit into some of the times where things, maybe you've been at peak fitness, you felt like everything was going great, but it didn't go great. And specifically, I want to hone in a little bit on something that we share, which is concussion and head injury. And this podcast, What's the Rush, was actually kind of born out of my experience the last 3 years of having some really long-term post concussion symptoms, and still some that I'm working on. And so this last 3 years was a period of really stopping for me, not getting to do what I love, not even feeling like myself. And so this podcast is kind of about some of those spaces when we slow down and what we learn. And I can, coming out the back of it now and recovery's going well, I can see there were a lot of gifts in that stillness, but in the middle of it, oh
Oh.
man, it
Yeah.
wasn't great. And so I've read about some of your concussions. I know you've had multiple concussions,
Mhm.
and sort of a progression of, not stepping off the race course or racing when concussed. And then a few years later, actually having the maturity to actually step off a race course after a crash and be like, nope, I'm not going to risk this. So I'd love to go through a little bit of your concussion progression and kind of what that was like for you. I think we talked a little bit beforehand, the past 4 years, you've had a concussion about once a year, or maybe
Yeah.
twice a year. And some of them, all of them, really in very, very big, high level events that you were peaking for, you're going for, they're part of your career.
Mhm.
So, do you want to take us to, I think it was 2022, maybe was that your first concussion in a race?
Yeah, yeah. So in 2022, I was actually preparing for the Cape Epic in South Africa. So I was 1 week out and I was riding just alone, mountain biking as I always do, and just, super small minor crash, kind of front wheel slid out. And I'm not sure if my head hit a tree or just kind of hit the ground, but pretty instantly, I was like, "Oh, that was a pretty solid hit," you know? And I feel like I've had times where you kinda I don't know, if you feel off, you're like, "Oof, that was, like, a big one," but you're fine, you know? And, I think, like, I never had a concussion before that I know of. I probably hit my head, minorly, and never had problems. But riding home, I was like, I feel not and later on, I really learned what that, like, fogginess felt like and just, like, really bad, like, ugh, like, this feels very uncomfortable. It was very minor, but I definitely that day was like, something's wrong. I hit my head. And then that kind of progressed where that week I was pretty tired, riding felt really bad, like raising my heart rate felt really bad. Just these symptoms that I've learned since that would be like markers of like, okay, take it off, that
Mm.
return to play thing or protocol. And so I was pretty lucky because that week it was like every day I saw progression, it was like easy day, next day, riding, okay, good. And then I like hop on the plane, went to South Africa, raced in 100 something degrees and was fine. Like didn't think of anything of it and just moved on, raced the Cape Epic. We won. It was great, had a great season. I mean, the Cape Epic, it took me a longer to recover from the Cape Epic actually than my concussion
Yeah.
probably. And I had a great season. So that concussion was like awakening where it was scary. I didn't like how I felt in my body. I didn't like how that injury really affects like your life, and that was like very eye-opening for me. But other than that, the recovery was so fast and I was so like quickly back to doing what I love that I kind of brushed it away as like, okay, that's
Yeah.
yeah, I was all right, that happens. I'm okay, so I don't
Yeah.
think it was until the one in 2023 where I started taking things really seriously.
Yeah, and I think that one you missed like 4 World Cup races, didn't you? It was pretty, you had to take a big
Yeah.
time off from training. You want to take us
Yeah.
through that one?
Yeah, so that one we in at the World Cups we used to race the short track on Friday. We'd have a day to pre-ride on Saturday, and then we race the XCO on Sunday. So I'd had a pretty good short track event, and then during the pre-ride on Saturday, the conditions had changed. We were in Austria, and the conditions had changed just a little bit with some rain the night before, and there's this one like big chute where the rest of the course had been pretty dry, maybe a little slick in sections, but nothing bad. And then there's this one section where actually we'd been waiting on up top because a girl had just crashed on it. And I was like, oh, this is nothing, I got this. And then did the same thing. Like, and behind me, after I crashed and was sitting on the sidelines, like getting help. So many people, it was just one of those spots, where the conditions changed so quickly. It went from like, dry to super slippery, all these routes, and you're just reading the terrain as best as you can. But I crashed right on my face. I scratched my glasses and also my lip. I cut my lip open, and I didn't hit my head directly. And so that was a misunderstanding of concussions that I had at the time, that you had to have a pretty direct head hit to get a concussion. But I definitely had, facial injuries and wasn't feeling myself. I was pretty like shaken up by it. And I'd also hurt my hand pretty badly as well. And I went to finish the lap and just called it afterwards. I just wasn't feeling good. But I really honestly did not think I had a concussion. I was like, I've had a concussion before and I know what those symptoms are. And this is not a concussion. Like, I was certain of it. And
Was
I
your team
probably,
get medical? Did you get checked out, or was your team like supporting you in
yeah.
any way? Or
Well, they had a medical group right where I crashed. They checked me out, but they were focused more on like, oh, my hand and my face, and you feel fine. And I probably should have had more support at the time than I did. And I think, that my mindset then was, the bigger the challenge, the better. Like, I'm always wanting to see what I can overcome. And so in that moment, it was like, okay, can I heal, fix my hand so I can ride, this face, like my face was all like bloody and looked so funny. And I didn't feel good. I was so tired, but I was like, if I can overcome this, I don't know what it is, inside you just want to overcome. And the bigger the challenge, the stronger you'll be. And I just wanted to race so bad. And so I think, your team, my team, they wanted to support me in that too. It was like, okay, she's fine. She has a small scratches. She's not saying she's super uncomfortable. So anyways, I raced the next day in the XCO race, and I actually had a pretty decent race. I was almost in the top 10, was pushing really hard. And then after the race, our team had won the women's overall that day. So like accumulatively between the three of us, we'd had more points than the other teams. And so we got called up to the team podium, and it was all of a sudden pretty hot. And I think it was really hot in the race as well, but I hadn't noticed. I was just, racing at my best. And I was sitting in like a hot tent, and then came out, and then just like tunnel vision, everything just kind of went black, and I just like fell over. And I came to pretty quickly, but I'd basically had, a small, like basically passed out, or I don't know what you'd call it,
yeah.
and then I was like, oh wow, like from then on I felt awful. Like, the race didn't really do it, but after that I was like really bad concussion symptoms, knew probably that I had a concussion or something went wrong, and I was basically not myself. I think it took me like 5 weeks to get back to being able to train like consistently. And then from there, having a slow, steady build. Like, my goal was really, I want to be at 100% before I train at 100%. And so I really took the time and had to work with a lot of people to get there. I think it took me, 3 weeks of like trying to push through. I was living in Europe at the time, and I was pretty determined to like, I'll do the next race. Okay, if I can't do that weight race, then I'll do the one after that. And then my boyfriend and I, we were walking out of the grocery store, and we were walking back to our hotel, and I was like, I need to sit down. I thought I was going to pass out like on the way back from the grocery store. And then from then I was like, okay, I'm going back home. I'm going to get experts, I need to figure this out basically. And so yeah, it was crazy.
How did you, I mean, it's great your boyfriend was with you and that you had these symptoms of passing out that were kind of pretty big. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a pretty big wake up call. But
Yeah.
the more subtle symptoms, like you said, you just weren't quite feeling yourself. You weren't feeling 100%. You're staying in Europe thinking, okay, maybe next week. Okay, maybe next week.
Yeah.
Um,
It
do you
was
think if you,
lingering for sure.
yeah. So
Mhm.
how were you feeling during that time of like, how's tomorrow going to be? And were you kind of self coaching, self guiding yourself in this?
Yeah, no, so by that time I had someone reach out and kind of explain to me that, a concussion doesn't have to be a direct hit to the head. Whiplash is often a big um, cause of concussions, and facial injuries are a sign of getting a concussion or whiplash, and that you need to take those first 48 hours are a key recovery window. So for example, if I had a crash and someone had been like, oh wow, you have facial injuries, you obviously had like a serious crash, you probably need to take it off for the next two days, I might not have had any of the symptoms that I had. But instead I basically completely played with that key recovery window after the initial hit, where I race, increase my heart rate, my blood pressure, race in heat, just like did everything wrong that I could have done wrong, and then that really caused, for me, what were really minor concussion symptoms that lasted a long time. So I never felt those really bad concussion symptoms that I had from my first concussion of, oh, wow, I hit my head, riding doesn't feel good, I don't want to do this. And then that slow build back, this was like, I never felt really bad, but it always kind of lingered in this fog, or when I would start riding, the fog would get worse. So I was always in this place of like light discomfort, and that took a really long time to fully go away. And I think it was also potentially tied to like a heat reaction as well that I had from maybe pushing myself too hard in the heat, or passing out in the heat. And those symptoms can be very correlated as well. I guess having a, like a heat stress or heat stroke situation, which didn't have a heat stroke, but something like that, those symptoms of your head and the fogginess can be related. And so I think riding in heat, staying in Europe where it was hot, was also really exaggerating some of my symptoms. Um, but
What's your psyche? Like, what were you going through day to day? I mean, this is your job. This is your profession.
yeah,
You basically can't go to work. And
yeah,
it's the year before Olympics where you're needing to get points. You're needing to make sure
yeah,
that your longer term goals, which are midterm goals, the next
mhm,
year out, that you can fulfill them. I mean,
yeah,
you sound really calm talking about it now. And you're like, yeah, I passed out. I missed a bunch of races. Then I went home.
yeah,
But what was really going on in your heart and your head and your
yeah.
psyche at this time?
Yeah, it definitely got worse as, things continued to extend. Cause like I said, it was like, okay, I'd go on an easy ride and like couldn't do that all of a sudden. I was like, this fog would come in on an easy ride. So I'd go home and okay, well, maybe tomorrow I can do the easy spin. And I definitely I just kept pushing through. I was determined that I would get through the other side. And that also affected my symptoms, instead of initially just stopping, pausing, okay, until you feel good doing daily activities, then move on to the easy spin or get on the bike or start doing, you know, walks, whatever, step by step. I was very determined to just keep going. And that, what I've learned now is that set me back even farther. Those initial decisions that I could have made really affected me. Once we figured out that this is taking a long time, something's going on, my mom actually flew out to Europe and she was with me for a little bit to support me there, which was incredible. And we were, I think, just sometimes you just break down, you're just like, I'm so, you know, uncomfortable. Like I feel like I'm in this fog. I can't even enjoy life daily in the same way. You're not experiencing everything the same way as you do normally. So that's almost, at some point you're just seeking that. You just want to feel good and happy and, free in a way. You're like almost in a cage kind of. I don't know how to explain it, but that you just don't feel yourself. And so I think, gosh, there's so much to it. But I think just like trying to work through that, having the sport I need, I was really focusing on my nutrition. And then one thing I started to do, because I was like, okay, well, if I can't train and I can't race, then at least I can train my mind in some way. So I really started meditating. I meditated like 20 minutes a day. I was journaling a lot. I started, finding, people to work with on my mindset and my mentality, also my skills work. I was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna crash again, I want to at least, one, develop my skill set so that's I can handle more and crash less, also crash better. And I just really started building my circle and my team and support network and figuring out, crashing's inevitable in our sport, but how could I, free myself a little bit so that in the future, if I do crash, one, I know what to do, and two, I'm not scared in my riding of crashing. So I could tell there were a lot of things from all of this that would continue to weigh on me. And I think you're right. What was also hard is that was the starting of our Olympic qualification for Paris in 2024. If my goal that year was to win world championships or be on the podium and qualify. So when I slowly saw like all of that was slipping away, that was really hard to process. And I ended up actually skipping world championships that year. I didn't race until after. So there was a lot that happened. And yeah, it was really challenging.
I mean, we have kind of some similarities there. I prolonged my symptoms as well by not doing the right things initially, not getting the right help, not understanding concussion or brain injury, and having that athlete mentality of like, I can just push through this. Like we're trained to like keep doing hard things, just keep going harder. So I share that with you because I did the same thing. And then at a really low point, I also, like you, started journaling more and meditating and doing breath work and finding other ways to support my nervous system. But for me, and bringing in a network, which it sounds like you did, it took me a lot longer than you did, but it must have felt like an eternity. It's right in the middle of And same, I couldn't work. I hid a lot of my symptoms out of just denial and fear and shame, and I got this, I can push through it. So a lot of similarities, but also I love hearing that you're finding modalities that support you long beyond your racing career. Did you get into therapy? Did you do any do you have a psychologist that supports you on your team? Did you have some conversations like that?
Yeah, I worked with the psychologist short term, and I feel like I just made sure that the people that I connected myself with all had that, I don't know, just the way they work with me helps me build my mind, or I learn from their mind. And so I think all the people in my circle in general, they are that like psychologist for me in a way. My family, my team, and then, my coaches, all of them bring that to me. And I definitely, there's so many resources online too that I was finding courses, online and just learning as much as I can. And I enjoy, I really like having a team of people to help me excel and get better. But I also love learning through my experiences as well, as much as I can. I feel like sometimes when someone tells you something that will help you, or that will help you get through something, or that will, help you develop as a person, it's almost a shortcut and you miss the reason why. And unfortunately, we usually have to learn things the hard way. But for me, I understand that for myself, through the concussions and through my challenges, if I have to kind of dig my way through something that gets me to journal or gets me to meditation, the reason for me to do that thing is much stronger for myself. And so I think, I don't know if I'm wording this properly, but that helps me develop my mind, I think, in a more powerful way. So yes, I have a lot of people that support me psychologically and are my team and help me develop my mind. But I also love to develop my mind on my own and using my life to try and develop my own awareness to grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's proven that, adversity builds strength,
Yeah.
and that in grief or in loss, there is
Mhm.
growth. But when you're in the middle of that, it's
Yes.
hard
Yeah.
to be like, oh, there's going to be a great lesson on the other side of this. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm curious, were you afraid you'd never race again? You were going to lose your
Mhm.
job, you're going to lose your sponsorship, you're not going to make the Olympics? Like, was
Yeah.
that swirling around in your head?
I probably had those days for sure. Um, but I think I always believed I would overcome, you know? I just always believed that I could, and I also, I had moments where I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, where I started to see progression, and I was working through it. And yeah, I
That's
really thought I
awesome.
could, but it was hard. And so I think you're right. I like in the way it sounds now is, oh yeah, you got this. But it is super scary. Concussions are really scary, and they feel awful, and they can have long lasting effects that affect your life, your career, your way of life. And yeah, that's not easy to overcome. And it took me a lot of time and people and resources to finally start to see the the progression. For me, it was I had to go home. I came home to Santa Cruz, where it's really nice because it's coastal. It's like the same temperature every day, so it was like cooler weather. I was able to get into Stanford and get some help, and kind of reset my return to play protocol. I basically had to stop. I was like, you need to stop getting through this return to play protocol. Take like a week or 2 weeks, and then just slowly. And so that kind of helped her every other day try and get through the protocol. And the hard thing about concussions, at least mine, is that the symptoms are hard to read. And I think, as we're talking, well, both of us, we went to, meditation, journaling. We're always trying to learn and figure ourselves out. And we also are really in tune with our bodies. And I'd say my concussions helped me get better at that. Really listening. How are you? Are you okay? Because people outside don't know how you feel at all.
Yeah.
Your family doesn't really know, your loved ones don't really know, your coaches, your team, they're like, they can't, it's not a broken leg where you're like, oh, she's got a broken leg, x-ray, it's going to take some time to heal. Like,
Yeah.
nobody can understand the symptoms you're feeling except for you. And so I really had to put aside any external pressures or perceptions of how I was doing. And that's some of the hardest stuff, is like, people think I'm okay to race, people think I'm okay to train, but I know I'm not. And you just have to let it all go. And that's really tough, of like, oh, should I be? Am I really feeling this? Is it okay that I'm taking the day off? All of that is hard to process. And the symptoms themselves are a little bit confusing sometimes. I think the tricky part about a concussion is that once you do hit your head, what I've learned since is it knows those symptoms so well, it goes quickly back to them. And so sometimes you have to really try and do daily life as well as possible, and then see if that creates your symptoms too. So I was trying to figure out this balance of, okay, am I feeling those symptoms, or does my mind know these symptoms so well that it's telling me I'm feeling those symptoms? It's a hard balance of being able to recover and push through and not have these symptoms, but also tune into your body when you do have the symptoms. And that's hard to explain, but that's what I was kind of going through, is this balance of, yeah, of
Yeah, and you've
the
got
normalcy of
brain
it. Yeah.
saying, "Push through, you're fine," and
Hmm.
half saying, "Am I? I don't know, I don't know." And so there's
Yep.
definitely this conversation that's happening
Completely. Yeah.
in your head.
Hmm.
You wrote in, I think in a social post while you were in this period that, that you were learning some things that you would take through to the rest of your racing. I'm gonna read this. It was
Oh
pretty cool.
gosh.
It says, it's been a relaxing few weeks. I've slowly been recovering from my concussion, easing back on the bike, minimizing screen time, prioritizing recovery for my body and brain. It hasn't looked like my usual day to day, but being more in the present moment is something I'll definitely bring with me once I'm back to my normal. Of course, it's easy for my mind to get caught up with where I wish I was and the visions I had for myself in my race season, but it's just not my time to race towards podiums right now. Time for those moments will come. Right now is my time to grow.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, how did you grow during that rest
Yeah.
period?
Yeah, I mean, I think in that caption, I really was aware of, um, you can't do a lot. I think when we can't train as hardworking people, it's like, what else can I do? Right now I'm in school. You're always working on something. How can my bike be better? Who can I communicate with to like develop and prepare for the season? So you're always working on something. And a concussion stops everything. You're like, okay, you can't train, but you also can't really use your screen too much. You just have to chill. And so my life really slowed down, and I was very present with little things. Sometimes I just sit on the deck, like hiding from the sun with umbrellas and just, chill or try and read a book or try and listen to a podcast, but mostly just be present and really present with the people I was with. And so I really wanted to carry that with me, that like slow nature of life and the presence and really the ability to really feel and tune into my body and my mind. And so I think I still carried that with me. Although, sometimes I probably need to come back to it. And
Was it
then also,
to stop? Was it hard to sit on the porch and look at the
oh,
birds?
yeah. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
so hard for me. I was like, when I just like doing things all the time, and so that was hard. But it's also such a good feeling, and the way I don't know, it's really good in a lot of ways, I think. And then also the meditation, the journaling, I learned a lot of strategies, and most importantly, the things we've already talked about. I learned how to listen to myself and to really tune into my body in another way. And um that helped me grow on a lot of my goals, which is really like a um seeking my human potential, but also like this state of mind that's really powerful and capable. And I think that those concussions have really helped me train my mind in that way, or tried to at least. And I think that's pretty cool for sure. But I learned a lot. Yeah.
I'm right there with you, and I sort of can feel, yeah, I was like journaling and sitting on the porch and being like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I'll empty the dishwasher, maybe I'll like stack wood, maybe I'll, clean
Yeah.
out my underwear drawer. Like
Yeah.
literally I wanted to be doing things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's hard to sit still, but it's such an amazing skill, mindfulness skill that you're developing, that you've
Yeah.
developed through this. So then we come back, you're obviously racing again at the highest elite level.
Mhm.
You had another concussion or another crash, and
Mhm.
you actually stepped off the race course and were
Yeah.
like, yep, I'm not going to continue. That was
Mhm.
a really, and I think I sent you a note on social media
Yeah.
at that time and shared your post because I was like, wow, this is really mature. This is amazing at the highest level to step off the race course. Like
Yeah.
that was a lot of progression in your awareness of
Yeah.
your healthy, like you said, it's an invisible injury. If you
Mhm.
fell and broke your arm and stepped off the race course, nobody would think of, they would be like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty bold maneuver for you to say, yeah, I have a head injury, no one can see it,
Yeah.
you look fine, and you didn't continue racing that day.
Yeah. Yeah, the hardest part about, well, 2024 was tough because I got two concussions. Like I said earlier, I had one, we had the Paris test event, which was 2 days on the course, and I was like 3 minutes in and crashed. Just another stupid crash, and instantly felt really bad symptoms, like awful, the worst I'd ever felt. I was like I was not in reality. It was awful. Like I felt awful. My sense of time was really bad. Everything was really bad for like a day. And then I was able to recover from that one pretty quickly. I knew the return to play protocol. It took me about a week or two to really get back to it and to consistent training again. And obviously then my Olympic goal was on the line. Like I remember sitting on the side of the course, watching everybody hit this jump, practicing lap after lap after lap, getting their extra time on course. And I was not there doing it. And I was like, oh man, this is brutal. And I was like throwing these little pebbles and my team manager was there and I was like, oh, I was just bawling. I was like, our plan was so good, and then I kept like looking back at the drop. Did I crash there and telling him? And then like every couple minutes looking back at the drop and like, I was just in an awful place. And then I also learned from that one, I was like, well, if they got those extra laps in, like I'm going to prepare like at another level for race day. I'm going to make sure I didn't miss a single lap that I really did miss. So I visualized that course like crazy. Like I made up for all those all that time, all my competitors got extra laps. I was like, I will know it even better,
Nailed it. Obviously you nailed it. Silver medal.
Yeah. But I had an amazing team. I flew my strength coach out, or my skills coach out, and he rode laps when I couldn't, and he took video, and like he was incredible. And he really made that Olympic medal possible in a lot of ways. But then going back to the race you're mentioning after the Olympics, one of my first races. No, let's see. Yeah, back in the U.S., we had our first North American World Championship marathon event, and I love marathon racing. I love the longer stuff. And I was really excited for that race, especially because it was in the US. And unfortunately, like an hour into the race, I just slipped behind another rider on a route, same thing, hit my head a little bit. Didn't feel too bad, but didn't feel like myself. Caught the group again, rode with them for another hour or so. I could tell, like, as the pace lifted, I just did not feel good. Like something wasn't right. I'm not myself. And I think, going back to a lot of what we've talked about is, I think as athletes, we aren't, we do listen to what other people say a lot. We want respect. We want to win races. We want to be a well-accomplished athlete. And so we do care about what people think. And I think what I learned in my previous concussions was I know who I am. And if I don't feel myself, something's wrong, and that's okay. Like that was kind of became my go-to. So I think in that race, I was like, I don't feel myself. And it took me 2 hours of still racing to be like, do I feel like myself? Am I myself? Like, what's going on? But I was like, okay, I don't feel right. So I just backed off the pace on one of the long climbs. I was like, maybe I can ride into it. I went through 2 feed zones questioning, should I pull out? No, I'm okay. I'm just going to go to the next one. And then I started looking at the map. I was like, okay, if I stop at this feed zone, it'll actually take me longer to get back because I just started feeling those symptoms like, I just want to be done. Like you're in that place where this isn't comfortable. I don't want to be riding. I want that ease again because you're in this such uncomfortable place. You want to break free of that. And so I was like figuring out the feed zone where I could just drive back as fast as possible. I like knew that inside. And so when I was thinking, I was like, hey, something's wrong. This is not you at all. Usually you're going as hard as you can because that's the feeling you love. And so finally I pulled out and I just started talking to, staff that we had. And I was like, okay, now, and they're like, yep, pull out, you're done. And the support was perfect. That's exactly what I needed. I went home. I chilled and I was hoping for, a faster recovery so that I could be back for the next races because we had 2 more North American World Cups that I was really excited for. And I was still in the top 3 for the World Cup overall. And it didn't turn out that way. I was probably still trying to race. I still tried to go through easy spins, pre-ride the course, do openers. And I think that just continued to extend things. So even though I've learned a lot, and I knew things were wrong, I just, it's still hard to to pull the plug and admit to the symptoms that you're feeling. So I'm still learning that. But yeah, I did pull out of that race because I knew something was wrong, and I ended up skipping the last 2 World Cups of the season in North America because I wasn't feeling myself. And Luckily, I was able to recover and go into my off season, and now I feel great. But yeah, concussions are tough. And now I'm just like, okay, what can I do to be proactive to avoid that kind of stuff? And skills work, neck strengthening, eye work, all this stuff. I want to crash well. I've been going to ninja gyms and like doing tumble and rolls. I'm like anything. And
That's amazing.
so yeah.
And you're kind of getting into, are you getting into neuroscience? Or you like, what are you
Yeah.
studying? I read something about that, like that has this concussion stuff sort of prompted interest in brain and psychology of sport and neuroscience.
Well, I've always been really passionate in education. And so I started university in 2017. I'm still working. I'll hopefully finish up this year. And yeah, I went to a small liberal arts and sciences school in Squamish, BC called Quest University. Unfortunately, it closed like a couple years ago. But there it was a design your own major in the form of a question. So my question was, how can education be optimized to inspire? And what I wanted to include in that is how can we engage young people, young students to be inspired, to apply themselves to their learning, and to be in educational environments that are, scientifically backed to be effective, engaging, inspiring for these kids. And I feel like our education system fails a lot in that way. So, yeah, in my degree, I've really tried to do some, as much neuro, memory and cognitive psychology courses as I can, to understand how people learn effectively and try and consider how we can apply that to education systems.
I mean, it's so cool that you're inspiring people obviously on the bike, and you're showing people what's possible, and young athletes coming up what's possible. But the fact that you also want to do this in your educational career as well, and maybe beyond bike racing,
Yeah,
like you want to help other people learn and be inspired.
yeah,
It's just really cool, Haley.
thank you. The mind's fascinating,
It is.
It's so fascinating.
It's
Yeah, I wish
probably
I never had a concussion, but I've definitely learned a lot from it. But I've always been interested in the mind and how we learn and how we can apply ourselves best. And yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
there's so much science behind, power meters and weight, strength to
Yes.
weight and
Yeah.
aerodynamics and all the physicality that we can measure our sleep and, nutrition and all that. But it's kind of a uncharted adventure territory. The mind is,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a really exciting next frontier for performance, and people are just starting to dabble in that. But like you
I
said, it
agree.
takes a lot of personal experience and sometimes
Mhm.
trauma, sometimes really hardship to
Mhm.
actually
Yeah.
learn how to strengthen the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to ask, what do you feel like you've learned the most from your concussions? Because yours is still lingering a bit.
It's still lingering
Yeah.
a bit. I
Mm.
actually feel like some of the similar things that you said, I feel like I know myself a lot better.
Yeah.
I'm a more whole person in some
Mhm.
ways because I have so much more awareness of how how my nervous system is feeling, how my brain's feeling, instead of just pushing through and doing a big work day or doing a work hour, I'm tired, and then come home and trying to work some more.
Yeah.
I'm really a lot more aware of all of the impacts that we have and the stimulus that we're getting, and
Mhm.
aware of my symptoms and how I feel, and then what I need to actually be the best version of myself. And,
Yeah.
there's a pretty, I've read some of my journals and looked back at what I've learned, but I've definitely learned a lot about the body and the mind and the interconnectedness of it. I've been such a physical athlete all my life, and I never had a sports psychologist in 30 years of racing. And I
Yeah.
learned a lot of psychology through experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
This is what works, but I didn't have the language or the understanding for it.
Mhm.
And the concussion really, forced me to educate myself about myself. And
Yeah.
so it's really great to be able to have this discussion with you because, like you, I want to help and inspire other people as well.
Mhm.
And I will say to people, we'll put some concussion resources in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd
Not
be
everyone
great.
who hits their head gets a concussion.
Yeah.
Concussions are treatable and
Mhm.
healable. And I think it's great to shine a light on this because we celebrate your wins and we celebrate everyone's wins. This is all
Yeah.
the great stuff that people do. But I really think as you're showing us, so much learning comes from the the hard stuff that maybe we don't show right away. And, I didn't. We can talk about it later once we're a little bit past, the
Yeah.
hard part of the learning. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree. I feel like it's taught me to work a lot smarter in my training as well, and just racing in general. You're like very aware of, how you can work hard in really thoughtful ways. And it's always more effective, actually.
Are
But
you a better
I'm glad you
athlete?
add,
Are
yeah.
you a better athlete because of
Oh,
what
for
you've learned
sure.
from your
Yeah,
concussions?
absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. And I'm glad you'll add resources for people too, because I think that like return to play protocols are so important, because if you do have a concussion, that symptom, that protocol should catch it so that you don't hit your head again, in a certain amount of time, and like within 7 days, or I think it is. And so I think that's so important, because you're right, you can recover, you can get better, but be smart about it. And it is very serious if you don't take the proper care. So
Yeah, we've got a ton of resources, the Brainstorm
right,
podcast series that I did, and some other
right.
friends, athletes who've had concussions,
Yeah.
your experiences. So we will share all that. What I'd like to end with and ask you, I could talk to you forever, but what I hopefully we'll
Yeah.
do this again. What I'd like to ask you to end with is, since this is called What's the Rush? I want to
Mm,
ask you, what are you trying to slow down, or what are you working on slowing down right now in your life?
yeah. I've slowed down a lot recently, especially at the end of this year. But I think um my priorities have definitely become very clear more recently, and I I really want to slow down with the people I love. Yeah. Spend good quality time with good people.
Amen to that. That's huge, because our community around us,
Mhm.
all the race wins, all the medals are amazing, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's our community that's right around us that is the most special thing in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Haley, thank you so much. I love this conversation, and I look forward to meeting you in real life one of these
Yeah.
days.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Such an honor to talk with you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hey, it's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.